Hi everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at the 2020 Senate map, and I'm going to be making a prediction as to how each of these situations are going to go. So let's go ahead and start off with classifying the safe states for each particular party, and actually today we're going to be doing it based on solid, likely, leaning, and tilt, but leaving no states, tilt, but leaving no states there as toss-up states. So Oregon, obviously safe for the Democrats. Illinois with Dick Durbin, he is safe for the Democrats. Massachusetts, Ed Markey. Rhode Island, Jack Reed. New Jersey, Delaware, all these are safe states for the Democrats that they're going to take either way. Virginia is not competitive this cycle. Mark Warner is looking very good for re-election. New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan, it's an open seat, but Ben Ray Lujan looks like he's going to have a cakewalk there in New Mexico. Let's go ahead now and classify some safe Republican states. So Idaho is safe, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska with Ben Sasse, Oklahoma, I believe, is also going to be safe. Arkansas, they're not even running a Democratic opponent in Arkansas, so Tom Cotton, they're running unopposed. Louisiana as well. Sorry about that. Tennessee looks like it's going to be safe for the Republicans, and West Virginia. So you can see here this map has really expanded out in the past few months. Democrats had some strong recruitments in some of these states, and it's looking pretty good for them going into this election. So let's now go ahead and go through some of the states likely to stay in that Democratic column. So Michigan, definitely a state likely to remain Democratic. And by the way, let's just go ahead and move Kentucky there into the safe Republican column. It's not looking too competitive for Amy McGrath this time. Michigan, likely for the Democrats. Minnesota, likely to stay in that Democratic column. New Hampshire, I forgot to add that as a safe state for Jeanne Shaheen to go on and win her re-election. So 46 Democrats and 40 Republicans. Let's go ahead and classify some of the likely Republican states now. And there really isn't all that many of them. So Texas, some people had thought, maybe Texas could become competitive. It doesn't seem like that's the case for MJ Hagar. It looks like incumbent John Cornyn is going to win his re-election there. Moving on to the next state, we're going to take a look at the state of Mississippi. Cindy Hyde-Smith, despite running against Mike Espy, who almost beat her in 2018, is not looking all that competitive. There was a competitive poll, and that's why it's not a safe state. It's a likely state. There was a relatively competitive poll, and could Mississippi with Cindy Hyde-Smith be the next South Carolina that we were talking about a few months ago? Maybe, but right now, especially given Mississippi's traditional Republican lean, we're going to give it over to the Republicans. Okay, I believe those are all the likely Republican states, so let's now go ahead and move on to the leaning Democratic states right now. Let's go ahead and move the state of Arizona into the leaning Democratic category, even though incumbent Martha McSally, she's not doing very well right now. Same thing in Colorado, with Cory Gardner not doing too well there in the state of Colorado. State of Maine, we're going to come back to. That's pretty competitive still. As for the leaning, by the way, these two will both be flips, by the way. These are flips over to the Democrats. It's flipping over. So both of these states, these should be states Republicans. About now, they kind of need to decide, are we going to, try and win back these seats, or are we just going to let them go to the Democrats and focus on other targets? So they're going to need to make that decision. But right now, Democrats on the offense, looking very good in Arizona and Colorado. As for the leaning Republican states, Alabama with Doug Jones, this is another flip, this time to the Republicans. Alabama with Doug Jones is looking pretty good for Tommy Tuberville. the Republican there. Moving over to the state of Alaska, Dan Sullivan looking pretty in a surprisingly tight race actually for re-election against Al Gross, but given Alaska's traditional leanings, we're going to be moving this into the leaning Republican column. 44 Republicans, 48 Democrats. Let's keep going here. The state of Montana, some had hoped with Steve Bullock it would move over to the Democratic column, but actually the polls that we've been getting out seem to show Steve Daines, the incumbent, slightly ahead. So we'll be giving this one, especially with Trump on the top of the ticket, over to the Republicans. The state of Kansas, there's a well-funded Democratic opponent in Barbara Breuer, but Roger Marshall, the incumbent, Roger Marshall, the Republican, I believe he's currently a member of the House, is running for Senate, and given Kansas' traditional leanings, we're going to be assuming this one goes over to the Republicans also. Moving on to the next state, we're taking a look at the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia, we actually have two elections in Georgia. So in Georgia, they have two elections. In the main election, this is a race between David Perdue and Jon Ossoff. And here's the key thing about this Georgia race. If Jon Ossoff doesn't win on election night, it's going to be much harder for him to win in the runoff because firstly there is a libertarian candidate running in Georgia, and this applies for the Georgia special as well, but that's a bit interesting. But the main Georgia, Jon Ossoff really needs to get above 50% in the first election because firstly there's a libertarian candidate, spoiler candidate for the Republicans, and secondly he'll have Biden on the top of the ticket to bring out African American turnout, whereas if it's just in a one-off special election in Georgia against a conservative Republican, I mean, you can imagine how that's going to go for Jon Ossoff. So Jon Ossoff really needs to get in on this first ballot in November, because if he makes it to the runoff, it may seem like a good thing that he's able to do, but actually it will probably mean going down in defeat. Georgia special, Matt Lieberman, the other Democrat running, doesn't look like he's in a good position right now. He's getting like 3%, 4% in recent polls, and actually Raphael Warnock is being able to benefit from Kelly Loeffler and Doug Collins splitting off that conservative vote. So it looks like it's probably going to be Raphael Warnock and either Kelly Loeffler or Doug Collins in the runoff. So, and again, in this runoff, I'm not going to say that Democrats are favored, but again, having Kelly Loeffler or Doug Collins, both of them aren't perfect, so you could be able to run on that. So both of these we're going to be, both of these we're going to be leaning over to the GOP. And you can see the Republicans are really starting to catch up here, 48-48. Moving over to the state of South Carolina, this one's going to be really interesting. Jamie Harris and Lindsey Graham. As much as everyone's been really surprised by the polling that we're getting out of here, showing that it's basically a tie, at the end of the day, even just because South Carolina is still South Carolina, Lindsey Graham has the incumbency advantage. We're going to be giving this one over to the tilt Republican column, and that's one that I think no one thought would be on the radar. No one would have thought would be on the radar just a year ago, and now the fact that it's competitive and could even go to Jamie Harrison, that's very interesting. Moving on to the next state, we're going to go ahead and look at the state of Maine, Sarah Gideon, Susan Collins. Right now, especially given the Amy Coney Barrett situation, Susan Collins not looking the best. So we're going to be giving this one over tilt towards Sarah Gideon to take this one, especially given Biden is on the top of the ticket. Susan Collins hasn't had a Democrat on the top of the ticket, in a presidential race since 2008. Which is 12 years ago, and I think it's fair to say she's changed a lot since then. So 49 Democrats, 49 Republicans, two toss-up seats right now, Iowa and North Carolina. North Carolina, the Democrat is currently involved in a scandal. involving an extramarital affair, Cal Cunningham, facing questions on character. But at the moment, the polling still, even though Cunningham has dropped a bit, is still looking pretty good for him to go on and win. And the state of Iowa, this is probably the closest race. We're looking at Sarah Gideon and Joni Ernst. Right now, given the blue wave, that's the incoming blue wave in 2020, we're going to be giving this one barely over towards the Democrats. So this is my 2020 Senate prediction right now. 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans. And if I had to pick, in terms of, is it going to be more towards 52 Democrats or more towards 50? There's so many of these just kind of slightly leaning Republican races here. Alaska, Montana, Kansas, Alabama, Georgia to Kansas, South Carolina, that if I had to pick, one of these probably gonna move towards the Democrats, because that's just how probability works. If the Democrats have a 25% chance in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 25% chance in 7, you'd expect them to win about 2 of these races. I guess slightly under 2, but averages out to 2 of these races. So that's just how probability works. So I wouldn't be surprised if an upset was in, I don't know, South Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised, especially in some of these states where we haven't had recent polling, like Kansas and Alaska. I wouldn't be surprised if these move towards the Democrats. But that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Good night.